In the book of Exodus, God promised to lead Israel to the Promised Land after He freed them from slavery. But like the story of God's work in freeing Israel from Egypt, God's work in leading them to the Promised Land continued to be complicated and messy. The story of Israel mirrors what often happens on a cross-country family trip. For those not in the driver's seat, the journey seems to wander and take longer than it should. Much like kids on a long family trip, the Israelites, too, asked, "Are we there yet? How much longer?" For 40 years, God guided the Israelites by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. To avoid the Philistines, He led them on a roundabout route to the edge of the Red Sea. While camped there, Pharaoh's army chased them. Stuck between the sea and an insurmountable army, the Israelites questioned the direction God had led them. This would be the first time, but not the last, when Israel would complain to God, questioning why they were put on this journey. They even wished they could be back in the land of slavery. This established a pattern found throughout that 40 years. Israel would complain against God, doubting God's promise of delivering them. God would hear their complaint and respond, showing His faithfulness to His promise. So, Israel complained about bitter water. God's response was to make it sweet. Israel complained about having nothing to eat. God responded by providing them manna from heaven for 40 years. When they were without water, they again complained, and God responded by commanding Moses to strike a rock, and out of it gushed water. Israel's complaints and doubts weren't always received kindly by God. At times, God's wrath would burn and consume outside parts of the camp. Numbers 11. Because of their impatience and grumbling, God sent poisonous snakes amongst the people, killing many. In each instance, Israel's experience of God's wrath brought about repentance as they pleaded with Moses to intervene for them with God. Moses would then turn to God and recall God's promises. In turn, God had mercy on His people. Jesus Himself references this mercy in John chapter 3, verse 14. And though the Israelites experienced many trials and temptations in their 40 years in the wilderness, God did fulfill His promise to them by delivering them to the Promised Land. Certainly, this did not take place in the timeline the Israelites expected, but God had promised to deliver them, and God does not and cannot lie.